Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Curt Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2023 Volkswagen Tiguan. Now here's how your hitch is going to look like when it's installed on the Tiguan, and the great part is it's a hidden cross tube, which means the only thing that you're going to see is the receiver opening here, and the rest of it hides behind the fascia, give you a nice clean OEM style look. Now this is a 2" by 2" receiver tube opening, which is pretty well the standard when it comes to hitches, which means you're going to have tons of options when it comes to bike racks, cargo carriers, or even a ball mount. And all of your accessories are going to stay in place with a 5/8 pin and clip, which is not included with the hitch. A lot of times your accessories though will come with one, but if you wanted to pick up a locking version, those are really nice. You can leave your accessories on, lock it in place, and know that no one's going to walk away with it. You can pick plenty of options here at eTrailer, and that way they stay secure. Now, if you plan on towing a trailer, you do have a rolled style safety chain loop, nice and open for your standard S hooks, or even a larger clevis style hook is going to work just great with this. Now, speaking of towing, you're going to want to adhere to the weight capacities not only of the hitch, but also of the vehicle. So check your owner's manual to see what it's capable of and compare it with the numbers of the hitch, which come in at a pretty good rating of 3,500 pounds of your gross trailer weight rating. And that's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. And you also have a tongue weight rating of 525 pounds, and that's going to be that downward pressure that's put on the inside of the receiver tube opening, and that's going to be important for your cargo carriers or bike racks. You're not going to want to go over that weight limit, but honestly at 525 you'll be able to load up a 4-bike rack and not have to worry about exceeding that weight limit. Now, a few quick measurements from the center of the hitch pin hole to the furthest point of the rear fascia. We're looking right at about 5 inches, and that's going to be important for some of your folding accessories like a cargo carrier or bike rack. As they're in the stowed position, you want to make sure they don't hit the rear fascia of your vehicle, so that's something to look at when choosing accessories. Now, as far as your ground clearance, we come in right at about 1 foot, so that's pretty decent. It's something to consider when you have loaded accessories like a cargo carrier or bike rack, as they are suspended. As you go up an incline, they're going to want to tilt towards the ground, so keep that in mind when driving with accessories on or going over any steep or rough inclines. Something else to consider too is if you are planning on towing a trailer, that measurement's going to help you determine if you need a rise or a drop, so you can measure the coupler height of your trailer and match that based on the difference. Now, if you're wondering if your hands-free liftgate is going to work with the hitch, the answer is yes. Now, as far as installation goes, this one looks like it's pretty simple, and that's because it's just 4 bolts that go through the frame rail. You're going to fish wire those out and the hitch will bolt up, but you do need to lower the exhaust, which is pretty simple here. And we did run into some variances that the instructions really don't point out, but I'll show you those. And main thing is you're going to have to scrape away at some undercoating to really get the hitch up in place. So we'll take a look at the installation, and you can follow along to make sure you get your hitch installed. Now, to begin our installation, we're going to be removing the plastic shroud that's in between the muffler and then attaches to the rear fascia. And this is going to allow us to have that space for the hitch to live. So we will not be putting this back up. So once we remove it, you can set that aside. And to get this off, pretty easy. You have some Torx bits that run along the bottom here. So with a T25 Torx bit, we'll go ahead and get these removed. So just work your way along this edge. It looks like we have 5 of them. There's also going to be 2 10mm plastic nuts, and these are going to be kind of tucked in this opening here as well as on the other side. So go ahead and you can get those removed. Now, they may stay attached to the plastic piece, and sometimes they'll want to kind of cinch back up on those threads. So putting a little downward pressure will help kind of pull that away from it. Now we can go ahead and set this aside. Next, we're going to lower down our exhaust to give us a little bit more space to get our hitch up in place. And these are attached to the frame via this bracket. And it's going to be a 13mm bolt. So we'll go ahead and remove both. There's going to be one on each side. Now, depending on your Tiguan, you may or may not have bolts that are going to be in weld nuts here on the side of the frame, and we're going to be using those to install it, but this one does not have it, so I'm going to show you the fish wire technique, and that way we can get our hardware in place. Now, as far as the fish wire technique, we're essentially just pulling a spacer block and a carriage bolt to become our mounting points for the hitch. And we're going to be using this access hole to feed this through. So what we'll do is take our coiled end and feed this through this hole here and just kind of push this back. And you can throw a bend in it if you need to, but just kind of fish wire this through the frame rail until you find it here at the access hole. Now it took us a little bit to kind of get this fish wired through, but what I'm going to do on this back tail end here is put a nice bend, and that way it doesn't pull through while we're getting the rest of our hardware put on here. And it's also going to help when we get the hitch raised up, so you can just bend this back here. And then on our coiled end, we'll take a spacer block and a carriage bolt that you'll find with your hardware, and you're just going to take the spacer block and slide this up in the frame rail. And the carriage bolt, you're just going to simply thread onto this coiled portion. And then you're going to pull from the back side. Your carriage bolt, you might have to put it at an angle here just to kind of get it in. And if you need to, you can actually go this way and get the head put in first. And then just push the rest into the frame rail. And then we'll just take this and kind of jostle it around until we get that thread to pull through here. Now leave your fish wire on. This is going to help us make sure that these don't fall back in the frame rail, and it's going to make the installation of the hitch a lot easier. Now we're just going to repeat the same for the back mounting hole here. So take that coiled end and feed it down to that access hole. So now we'll just repeat the same process on the other side. Now we're going to get ready to raise our hitch in place, and I do recommend having an extra set of hands to support it. And what we'll also do is, I know that these go through the frame rail, but right now I'm going to push these back in. That way we can get the hitch in place, and we're going to pull these fish wires as we go up. And once we get it up in place and we pull this through, that's going to hold it up, making it easy to get our hardware in. So I'll go ahead and grab the hitch, and also make sure that you have at least 2 flange nuts ready to go so we can get those started. So we'll go ahead and get our fish wires pulled through the holes, and that's where those little bends kind of come into place, because once you kind of pop them through, it'll hold it there. So just run it through the corresponding holes. So just make sure you're over your exhaust when getting this back one in place. And then I'm going to pull the fish wires, just kind of keep them snug as we raise this up. You may have to kind of move your exhaust a little bit to get this in place. And then once we're kind of aligned with the hole, we'll go ahead and try to get our carriage bolt pulled through. Now the undercoating is going to kind of fight us as we get this in place, so you may have to really push up on it to get that, to align with those holes. Now I'm going to pull my fish wire off, and the pressure of the hitch should kind of keep this hardware in place, but go ahead and get your flange nuts started on each side, and that way it can support the hitch and allow us to get the rest of the hardware in place. So go through and hand tighten all the flange nuts on. Now, if you're having trouble getting the holes aligned, it's very possible it's from the undercoating that's kind of built up here. So you might need to scrape it with I have a putty knife here, and that's honestly, it might be worth doing before you get the hardware up in place to make this a little bit easier to slide up. So I'm going to scrape away at that to give us a little bit more clearance, and that way we can get it all aligned. Now I did end up having to really scrape quite a bit, especially up in the corners, and I think that's where our issues could run into as far as getting the hitch up in place, is that undercoating really does prevent it from getting up to where it needs to be to get the hardware through. So take your time here. Now something I can recommend if you're doing this at home in your driveway or garage, put a floor jack under here. Once you have the back ones supported, you can kind of raise that up, and that's going to help draw it exactly where you need it to be. And if you need to get a little bit more, you can obviously raise or lower as necessary. It just makes it a little bit easier than having to fight against the hitch. Go ahead, you can take your fish wires off, and then we'll get all of the hardware started. Now again, make sure you're either putting pressure here. You don't want to push that back in the frame, as you can run into some issues there. So we'll just get this started, and if you need to, you can actually pull down on the hitch a little so it'll put pressure or raise up on it, and sometimes that'll keep it in place as well. Now something else that we ran into that the instructions aren't clear on is this is putting quite a bit of pressure here on the bottom of our fascia, and that's probably part of the reason we had trouble getting this up in place as well. Now this is an R model, so yours may be a little bit different if it's not an R. But I'm gonna go ahead and actually trim this. That way we're not putting stress on our fascia. And honestly, that might be worth doing on yours. You're just gonna wanna check to see if your rear fascia matches this and that you have that clearance. Now that we have all of our carriage bolts hand tightened in place, I'm just gonna snug them up using an 11/16 socket. Now with our torque wrench, we'll go back and torque them down to the torque settings found in the instruction manual. And this is gonna be important because it's gonna make sure that it's tight enough to stay in place, but also not too tight, putting any stress on the threads. So we'll go through and just torque these down. Now if you need a torque wrench, you can get these here at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. But once we have these all torqued down, that's really gonna do it for at least the installation part of the hitch. Now don't forget to get your exhaust put back up. Now with everything tightened down, all that's left to do, load up our accessories and start enjoying our hitch. And that was a look and installation of the Curt Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2023 Volkswagen Tiguan.